Hey, how's it going, everyone? So what am I working on now? Well, I got my '06 Silverado. This is the 4.3 liter 5-speed manual, 4-wheel drive. I'm having a couple of problems with it. Now the truck's got 200 and I don't even remember the mileage. Let me check. 235,000 miles on it now. It's been a great truck. I love the truck. I don't want to get rid of it for any reason. It's just been such a great truck. I actually commute with this car every single day, 40 miles each way. So can't ask for a better vehicle, I'll be honest with you. It's been fantastic. But what are the problems I'm having with it? All right. One is I had a problem with the evap vent solenoid. I had replaced it, and the new solenoid is intermittently jamming. It'll jam full closed, so it won't allow the system to vent, and that creates a problem when you try to put fuel in it, because it won't vent, so the thing keeps clicking off, clicking off, clicking off. Then it'll go the other way, and it'll get stuck wide open. And I got codes for it stuck wide open, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, large leak detected. The other issue I'm having, which I'm more concerned with right at the moment, is the idle. Every once in a while, the idle gets stuck at around 1200 RPM. And when I go to shift gears too, like in between first and second, third, fourth, you rev it up to say, 3,500, 4,000 to make your shift, and the idle will just sit there at like 4,000 RPM. And if you just hit the clutch and never actually shift, it'll just sit there at 4,000 RPM or 3,000 RPM or whatever the RPM is, it'll just sit there. Other times, I'll come to a stop, and it's never stalled, but the idle will be like around 400 RPM. And it'll just sit there and be like lopey because it's so low. All right. So I got a code for that. Here are the codes that I have. So I got evap system, vent system performance, your rapid emission vent system performance. I have large leak detected. I already know that these two are from that vent solenoid. I will replace them eventually. I'm just not going to do it right now. Idle speed low. That's my concern right now. This heated oxygen sensor performance bank 2 sensor 2, that's brand new. I never had that code before. These are the 4 codes that I have. I'm not even too concerned about that code at this point in time. It's not throwing a check engine light. It doesn't have a check engine light yet. This idle speed low, what could that be? In all honesty, I think it's the idle air controller. I did replace the TPS back in the early spring, throttle position sensor. I was having a problem with something. I don't recall what it was. But I wound up replacing the throttle position sensor. I think I might have been setting a code for it. And as a matter of fact, it was setting a code for it. And if you remember, I did make a video on this. It was setting a code for it. It was kind of binding also. Like it would sweep, but it was kind of binding every once in a while. But then I come to find out after I changed it, it never actually improved it. I was thinking, okay, it's a bad throttle position sensor. Changed throttle position sensor. I still had the same problem. Turned out there was a cracked wire in the harness, so it was making contact, and then it wouldn't make contact, or it would have high resistance. So that's what would skew the readings. And I made a video on fixing that. So I really doubt it's a throttle position sensor, but a throttle position sensor can cause that. A vacuum leak can cause this. A dirty mass air meter can cause this. But normally a dirty mass air meter would cause a check engine light for usually a lean condition. Usually. Not to say that it couldn't be sitting in there in the computer like, hey, I'm ready to throw this code, but not just quite yet. Like these other codes I have now, they're not throwing a check engine light, but they're there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean the throttle body, because that's another possibility too, dirty throttle body. I've never cleaned the throttle body in this. And I've owned this thing since 180,000 miles on it. So I've never once cleaned it. So I'm going to clean the throttle body, and I'm going to replace the throttle positions, not throttle position, the idle air control valve. So let's do that. Oh, and then we're going to clean the mass air meter too. Just because any one of those things can cause this. Now the other thing too is when I said a vacuum leak can cause this, I don't think I have a vacuum leak. Other thing also, because this is a mass air vehicle, between the mass air meter and the throttle body, air leaks, like cracks in the bellow here, they can cause these kind of weird issues. Any kind of an air leak between the throttle blade and the mass air meter can cause these kinds of issues. I've already inspected it, I've already looked at it, I don't see anything, but I'm going to take it off to actually look and see what's going on. There you can see that throttle position sensor. Like I said, I replaced that, I believe it was early spring. I don't exactly recall. So, but let's go from there. Let's get this stuff, let me start getting this apart and we're going to go from there. All right, so under hood here, here's the new idle air controller. There it is. This thing's not cheap either. I don't remember what I paid for it, 60 bucks or something like that, or 50 bucks. Surprisingly enough, it's not as cheap as I thought it would be. I also got some carb cleaner. Now, you'll see carburetor cleaner, you'll see separate throttle body cleaner. It's all the same thing. The only thing is, don't use brake clean. And the reason not to use brake clean is if you run it through the throttle body, even a carburetor, and you start it, like you may have seen on some of the TV shows where they use brake clean to get a car started. Okay, if you're out in the open, you're out in the outside air, okay, the fumes that come out of the tailpipe are noxious. I mean, they are bad. Carburetor cleaner, once it fires inside an engine, it'll take your breath away. It's that bad. I just don't want to see somebody getting hurt. That's all. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this air intake off now. And on these, it's actually pretty simple. I'm going to have to set myself up on a tripod here. But they have this actually like wing bolt in the back here for this throttle body. Now this is a spider injector type of system. It uses a very high pressure of a minimum of like 55 psi to fire the injectors. They're poppet style. What do I mean by poppet style? They actually hold back a certain amount of pressure. Once the pressure increases beyond a certain point, the poppet blows, and it'll blow the fuel into the system. Yes, they actually have like an injector control, like a separate injector to control it, but the pressure has to be above that certain psi. Like you could have 54 psi and this car won't even start because it's not enough to blow the poppet in the injector. It has to be like 55 and above, I think. Something in that range. I've actually seen these things where the poppet portion goes bad, and these things will actually start to dump fuel, absolutely dump fuel. And then you'll wind up with a crankcase full of fuel. Let me get this off and let me show you. You won't be able to see the injectors, but I'll explain to you where they are. So now that I got that wing bolt out, I'm gonna just sitting up there. You pick up on this and pull it back. And there's your throttle body, and it is pretty darn dirty. You have a breather tube here, and then you have your hose here going to the mass air meter. I'm going to take this end off first, and I'm going to take the mass air meter off. I did look at the air filter on this thing when I changed the oil last, and amazingly enough, it's really not that dirty. So now, because this thing has the idle issue, what I want to do is I want to inspect this thing. See, there's an O-ring inside here. I'm just going to wipe that down when I put this all back together. Because the O-ring that seals there, if you don't have a good seal, like I said, it'll affect the reading from the mass air meter. Inspect your bellow. Make sure that you have no cracks in it. And everything looks good. Make sure your pipe doesn't have a crack in it anywhere. Your air pipe. All right, let me put that down. Now also, when you're dealing with like a idle issue, make sure your throttle cable is okay. Like here, I have free play in it. It tells me that's all good. And one thing I need to do too is, I don't know if there's any adjustment. I don't think there is, but I want to make sure this thing's going full throttle. But let's look down in here. And yeah, the throttle body's pretty dirty. And that's the passageway that the IAC, idle air controller, that little valve, that's where that goes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to disconnect it. It's right here. Then it should have two Torxes. There's one there, and then there's one on the other side down in there. We're going to get those out. So let's get the idle air controller out first, and then let's clean it. Clean the throttle body, that is. So pretty much I got a T20 socket on there, a torque socket, and I'm going to take the top bolt out. And then the bottom one is down here somewhere. It's going to be impossible for me to film this, for you to actually see it. But just so you get the general idea of what I got to do here. So let me get those 2 bolts out, and we're going to go from there. Okay, so I got the bottom screw out. Here's the top screw. Now this should just pop out. Now, be mindful of the O-ring, because I've seen it where the O-ring gets stuck inside the throttle body bore. But yeah, it's pretty dirty, but you can actually see the ring where this thing was seating in there. So now, what we're going to do is we're going to clean that throttle body. Now, luckily, this truck has a cable. Most newer, well, every single newer vehicle nowadays does not have a cable. So if you had to clean it, you got to manually go in there and open it up, you know, like such. And just got to be careful. Now, the one thing when you're doing something like this, you got to get in there and actually scrub it out. Don't use a wire brush or anything like that. That actually can damage it, or can scratch the bore, stuff like that. If you need to use like a rag, just spray it down with carburetor cleaner, throttle body cleaner, it's the same stuff. Or go inside, if you don't have an extra one laying around, and borrow this from your wife, or girlfriend, or a significant other. Just borrow theirs. And what we're going to do is we're going to clean the throttle body with this. Then make sure it's nice and clean when you put it back. That's all. So let me see if I can show you this. Alright, so I kind of rigged up a stand. Is this actually recording? Yes, it is. Okay. I rigged up a stand. It's a little funky. It floats a little bit. But basically, you're just going to clean this thing. Just spray it. You want to get down inside that area where the IAC actually gets its air supply from. And then, like I said, what you're going to do is spray that toothbrush really good. You're going to get down in here, and you want to scrub. You want to scrub everything. Scrub inside the bore. It's most important where the blade actually comes in contact with the bore, because that's where air gets bypassed and stuff like that. And also, there's a little tiny air bleeder hole in here. Make sure that that's clean also. So as you're doing this, you're going to spray some. Now, you don't want to go absolutely bananas with this stuff, because also you got to remember, you're going to flat out the motor with it. So, and then the toothbrush itself, just clean it off. Keep cleaning it off, and keep scrubbing. And I'll show you this in a second, what it looks like while it's, or when it's halfway done, because I'm cleaning one side first as best I can. What I'm doing now is I'm actually digging along the edge of that throttle blade there. I'm digging on the bottom side of it just to try to get up and around as much as possible. All right, let me unhook the camera here. Okay. Now, if you look at the bore, see how on the one side over here, there's still got dirt, or still got that gum stuck in there, but it's getting clean. So that's basically what I'm doing. So let me keep doing this whole thing, get it as clean as possible. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to shoot the cleaner in through where the IAC goes. If you have small brushes, use small brushes, get in there. I don't think I have any. Well, I might. I have to look. See if I have any kind of like small bore brushes that can get in there. Let me see what I got, and we're going to go from there. But I'm going to keep cleaning this. I'm not going to bother walking through that entire process. I'll just show you when I'm done. But you have the general idea. Okay, so we're all clean now. I sprayed inside the hole. I did not have a good little bore brush or anything to get in there. So basically I just sprayed from this side with the carburetor cleaner several times till I saw like relatively clean fluid come out of here. Because what happens is it kind of volcanoes up the cleaner that you're putting through, and it lands on the plate here. And when I first did it, it had a discoloration to it. So I kept doing it like just a little bit, wait a little bit, spray it again, wait a little bit, until I eventually had like a clean fluid laying there. So I know it's pretty clean. Like I said, I can't get in there though. But if you look now, you see it's pretty clean. So that should help. Now, I had mentioned about the injectors. This here is the connector for the injectors. That's the fuel line going in. The injectors sit below this plastic plenum here. And it's spiders, basically spider legs that come out, or crab legs, whatever you want to call them, that go to each cylinder. And basically, just like a conventional style multi-port fuel injection system, it basically will spray the fuel right above the valves in the cylinder heads. Obviously, it's in the intake, but it's like just above the valves itself. So this way, the fuel gets sucked in. On this design, you can actually change individual injectors. On certain early versions, you have to replace the entire assembly. So they're not terrible to do. It's just a bunch of bolts that hold the thing down, and then that whole plastic upper piece comes off. Now, one other thing too is, while I was spraying it, remember I got a distributor on this thing. So if you have like carburetor cleaner hanging out there, oh, you notice too, I disconnected the TPS just to make my life easier, that's all. If you have carburetor cleaner stuff hanging out that got sprayed, might be on top of the distributor, be careful. Let it dry before you start it, because it's highly flammable. So if, just in case you have like a weak distributor cap, weak ignition wire, and it sends out a spark, it can ignite it. So just something to keep in mind. All right, let me go clean this off, and I'm gonna stick this back in Meg's toothbrush holder. So here's the new one compared to the old one. Obviously you can tell which is which. And as you can see, this piece comes out and in. That's what controls the opening to basically create like an internal vacuum leak. That's what controls the idle. On this one, you can see it's all bottomed out, which is fine. Once I bolt this in and I cycle the key, that should work its way out. Even if I start it, it should work its way out, because the computer is then going to try to control the idle. So let me get this bolted in. That bottom bolt is going to be a little tricky because of where it's located. Not quite sure how I'm going to do it. Probably just going to use like a little magnet or something to try to get it in place. I don't even know yet, but let me figure that out, because it's very easy to drop. Obviously, because of where it's located, it's just going to drop on top of the intake manifold. But yeah, so let's go that way. One thing I want to mention, sometimes, remember how the O-ring was on here? Sometimes it's actually easier to put the O-ring on the inside first. See that? Set it on the inside first before you assemble it. Sometimes it's easier to do it this way. Let me just see. Yeah, and then get it in place like that. Trying to do it the other way, I was afraid I might tear it. And if you look, you can actually see a buildup of stuff has actually accumulated since that stuff dried. So after the carburetor cleaner, once I'm done installing the IAC, I'm going to spray that out one last time, and then we're going to go on to clean the mass air meter. Okay, so that's all in and on and everything else. The bottom screw, what I wound up doing was I went down to the idle run there, and I scraped off some grease onto the tip of my little torque socket, put the screw on that, and that's how I got it in place. So really no big deal. All right, let's get the mass air meter out. Same thing as getting the main intake tube off. It's just a screw there for the clamp. Get that off. We're going to take that whole mass air meter out. All right, with the connector off and that clamp loose, this thing does pop off. Takes a little bit sometimes. But inside here, kind of hard to see, but you see those lines there? Those are your sensors. That's your temperature sensor, your intake temperature sensor. So what we're going to do is we're going to clean all of this off from both sides. Don't scrub it with anything. I know some people will use a Q-tip or whatever. I don't recommend it. If you have good luck doing it, that's great. Me personally, I wouldn't do it, but totally up to you. Yeah, so let me do that. There was something else I was going to say, and I can't think of what it is. Let me go get the cleaner, and I'll show you how to clean this. All right, so here we go. Let me just set the camera a little bit. Now, really, all we're going to do is just clean this, spray it from both sides. Don't use compressed air to blow dry it or anything else like that. Just let it air dry on its own. And try not to get this stuff on your hands like that. So, but all good. What I'm using is this Electromotive electric parts cleaner. I also use QD electric parts cleaner. I actually don't have any at the house here. That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. Hang on one second. Let me get you out of the holder here. I've actually had a few people tell me, because I've done this in previous videos, and they say, well, if it wasn't ruined before, it's ruined now. You're not supposed to use that to clean them. Okay. If that's what you feel, that's fine. I've been doing this for 40 Years. I've been doing this since they came out. I used to use brake cleaner and carburetor cleaner until the electrical contact cleaner came out. They're like, oh, it leaves a residue with this, that. Okay, I've never had a problem. So, don't know what to tell you. Never had a problem. Anytime I've ever cleaned it with QD electrical contact cleaner or that stuff that I just showed you, never had a problem. Worst case scenario, would I use carburetor cleaner if I had to and I had no choice? Yeah, I would do it temporarily. I would actually go and get the electrical cleaner and clean it later on. They do sell a mass airflow cleaner if you're so inclined to use it. I've used it. Works exactly the same as this stuff. So, just letting you know. As I always say, reverse procedure to install. So let me do that. Let me get all of this back in place, and then we're going to start it and see what it does. Okay, so everything's back together. Everything's screwed in place. Everything's where it's supposed to be. So let's go and start this up. Now, it'll take a little bit to start because it's going to be flooded with that fluid. That fluid will not just dry up. All right. Just move my scanner. Let's see. Turn my light off. Give it a little fuel. And there you see some smoke. And there's the idle shooting up. It should calm itself down. You may have to cycle the key a few times or start it several times, but it should calm itself down all on its lonesome. It is possible too that it has some carburetor cleaner, residual carburetor cleaner getting sucked through. Gotta get gas. That's normal for me driving around on empty. Oh, that's weird that it's still racing like that. Shut it down. I don't think there's a idle set on this thing on the scanner. Let me look and see if there is. Hang on a second. I'm not going to walk you through this. If I find it, I'll show it to you. Okay, so I actually didn't find anything in there for that. There was just, you can control the idle. I had to pause it there, I sneezed. You can control the idle and make it come up and down. That's the only thing that was there. There was nothing on, like, resetting the computer for that. All I did really was go in and clear the codes. Yeah, so there's really nothing there for it. That means the vehicle doesn't offer it. It's not the scanner, it's the vehicle that doesn't offer it. Although some scanners can go above and beyond, but this one is a really good, this is, like I said, compatible to my Snap-on. All right, so I'm going to take this thing for a quick ride, but I'll tell you right now, it's idling at about, well, judging by the tachometer, it's idling at about 800, which I don't think is actually correct. I think that might be wrong. Let me just see. Let's go to engine data. Let's verify what this thing is actually idling at. Engine data 1. Engine speed. I'm just curious if it's actually correct, because as you see there, it's around 800. It actually feels like it's a touch lower, because I think this thing's supposed to idle at about 6. Oh, okay. About 700 RPM, 690, 700. All right. So that tachometer's off a little bit, but that's fine. So I'm okay with that. Before, in all honesty, as long as I've owned this thing, it's usually idled close to 1,000 on the tachometer there. So it's always been off. All right, let's go for a road test. Let's see what it does. All right, so I just took it up the road and everything seems fine. It doesn't do that flared RPM when I'm shifting anymore. And the RPMs are holding steady at about 700. I mean, it shows 800 here, but it's what it was before, about 700. And also when the AC kicks on and off, it doesn't fluctuate a lot. That's another thing I was doing. I didn't mention it before, but the RPMs would kind of go a little nutty when the AC kicked on. So I'm guessing it was just the IAC that was the problem to begin with. So I'm happy with that. I'm glad. You know, it was just weird because nothing I did showed, you know, no matter what I checked, everything looked okay, you know, in terms of data and everything else, everything looked fine. So anyway, all right, so that's it. Hopefully you got something out of that. If you did, hit that like button. If you could, please subscribe. All right, guys, have a great day. Keep wrenching.